Hello and welcome to BANTER, the official podcast of the American Enterprise Institute. I'm Phoebe Keller, the head of AEI's media department, and I'm here with AEI President Robert Doar. We'll be your BANTER co-hosts. Each week, we'll take you inside our think tank for conversations with leading policymakers and thinkers about today's pressing policy issues. Thanks for tuning in. Joining us today for a very special episode of BANTER is Paul Ryan, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives from 2015 to 2019 and is a distinguished visiting fellow with us at AEI. As many of our listeners know, during his tenure as Speaker, he spearheaded efforts to reform the nation's tax code, rebuild America's national defense, expand domestic energy production, combat the opioid epidemic, reform criminal justice, and promote economic opportunity. He's also served as the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and chairman of the House Budget Committee. For 2 decades, he represented Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District, and in 2019, he was selected to serve as Governor Mitt Romney's vice presidential running mate. And we're here mostly to talk about the new volume that's out today, where he is a co-editor, American Renewal, a conservative plan to strengthen the social contract and save the country's finances. Thanks for joining us on BANTER.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It's a very special thing to have the former Speaker of the House of Representatives with us, and is also an AEI scholar, and we greatly appreciate his time with us since he's left the House of Representatives. But I learned something last night at our annual dinner. I got to sit next to the Speaker's wife, Jana, and I've been wondering for a lot of time, what is the secret to Paul Ryan's success?
Now you know.
And now I know. She's wonderful. You've got a great wife.
She is. I outkicks my coverage, we like to say.
Yeah. Pretty quick. Football analogy pretty quickly. Okay. All right. So you've got this heavy book. I want you listeners to listen to it. It's a big, serious, heavy book full of facts and figures and positions. And I'm one thing I wanted to say is does a politician write a book like this?
Not many. Yeah, that's true. But I'm a recovering politician now, Robert. I'm actually a think tank guy now.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, because now some opposition research guy could.
Yeah, I don't
through
care
this.
about that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, the opposition research guys were going after me when I was chairman of the Budget Committee, authoring roadmap budgets back in the day. So, I stopped worrying about that stuff long ago in my political career.
So, speaking of things that you have to worry about in a political career. One of the sentences that's very prominent in the book and in the section that you write is the federal government, this is a common line, but you say it very directly, is making promises to its citizens that it cannot keep. And you emphasize the debt and the deficit and the burden of all this spending and lack of revenue to pay for it. And so the question I have for you is, in all the chapters, and again, it's a collection of essays that you've edited, assembled, persuaded scholars to write.
That's right.
Where are the cuts or new revenue or what are your favorite cuts or new revenue that you think would help us with this big problem?
I don't think the word cut is the right word to use, because the cut means that we need to go into an austerity mode right now and start taking things away from people and making government worse than what people think it is today. The point we make in this book is that we are headed for a debt crisis in this country. There's no mistaking that. We just don't know exactly when that's going to occur. And it is because our debt is on an unsustainable path. And we know when you have an unsustainable debt, that ends very badly for countries like ours. And it could cost us our reserve currency status. It could cost us the ability to finance our social contract, our social safety net. And so we propose very smart reforms of these programs. And those reforms bring our spending to be in line with more sustainable levels so that our debt is stabilized, so that we do not have a debt crisis, so that we do not have to do radical, ugly, real-time budget surgery on our social programs over which people have organized their lives around. These are the promises government's making to people it now does not have a means of keeping. So what we're proposing collectively in this book is how do you strategically reform all of these programs using the policy and the technology and the principles that we have here at AEI and what we know now in the 21st century. How do we overhaul these 20th century promises and programs to work in the 21st century, to work better, to better fulfill these missions, I would argue, and avoid a debt crisis so that we can get out of the malaise we are in, get out of the economic malaise we're supposedly consigned to in this century, and get us back to a path of real growth and prosperity and upward mobility in America.
So, okay, we'll call them reforms, and that's good, and they're long-term, and they change the incentives. But looking at them, which do you think are going to pay the biggest dividends in either reductions in long-term spending or in increases in revenue that you really like, the ones that are like your personal favorites?
The ones that are my personal favorites are the ones that move the needle the most, which are the entitlement reforms, namely the healthcare entitlement reforms, Social Security entitlement reforms, that grow those programs more sustainably at a defined rate, so that, I hate to get wonky, on an accrual basis, you can wipe out trillions of dollars of unfunded liabilities. You can not only guarantee the current benefits for current retirees and people about to retire, but for those of us in the X generation on down, you can actually have a system that will be viable and solvent for us when we retire, so that you take a look at what Jim Capretta is doing on Medicare. You take a look at what Tom Miller's proposing on Medicaid. You take a look at what Andy Biggs is proposing on Social Security, Burkheiser on disability, on and on. Those reforms change the growth of these programs to be more sustainable, but I would strongly argue they make these programs work better. They reflect the 21st century. They inject more choice and competition and private sector solutions that make these programs work better, but grow them more sustainably, so we avoid a debt crisis. On the revenue side, I think the way we propose tax reform, which is really going to put America in a very better competitive position with the rest of the world and help increase productivity and entrepreneurship, and therefore faster economic growth. So we're not proposing a massive increase in revenues. We're proposing to keep the kind of revenue projections we have and bring our spending closer in line with those revenue projections, but to do it in a way that we think can maximize economic growth and therefore wage gains and upward mobility.
So I'm going to come back to taxes in a minute, but let's stick with. I'm so glad you mentioned Andrew Biggs. He is the foremost expert on Social Security.
100%.
And one of the things he's told us in the past, and I want to be clear for our listeners, and maybe I have it wrong, so you can correct me, but is that what he's talking about is tweaks to the way in which you calculate benefits for people who are a way off from retiring.
Yeah.
That just make them a little less generous in the out
for
years.
higher income people.
For higher income people.
So the way he looks at different systems around the world, like the Australian system, the British system, and he sees what are some good ideas we can replicate. For instance, there is no minimum benefit today in Social Security to prevent people from slipping below the poverty line when they retire. He proposes a minimum benefit so that no one actually is under the poverty line in old age. But he also proposes to have the benefit increases taper for higher income people to protect people from price inflation for higher income people and maintain wage inflation protection for lower income people. That means testing of the benefit increase does save a lot of money. Adjusting the retirement age to reflect longevity clearly saves money over the long run. And he proposes what I call add-on accounts, meaning giving people, especially younger people, the ability to have additional savings go into private sector investments like index funds that can get them a better rate of return on their earnings over their working years, so they have a better retirement when they retire. My kids today, if Social Security could pay them what it's promising them, which it cannot, are scheduled to get a negative 1% rate of return on their FICA taxes. It's ridiculous. It doesn't have to be that way. What Biggs is proposing is a good safety net that works to keep people out of poverty, to keep people with guaranteed benefits, but also better rates of return so that they actually have a better retirement when they actually retire versus what they're scheduled to have today.
So let's now talk about revenues. And I haven't really studied carefully Kyle Pomerlew's chapter or Alex Brill's or who writes about revenues.
Yeah.
But can you just give our listeners a sense? Is it a higher income tax? Is it a bigger?
Yeah.
What tax are you changing?
They propose keeping the same revenue baseline we have today based on my seminal achievement in Congress, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which is that revenue baseline.
That's right.
Which basically is giving us historic revenues, by the way. Yeah. But they propose to change the tax system in a way that people like me have always wanted to get to. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a fantastic down payment on tax reform. It has proven to be very internationally competitive. It was a really good down payment on tax reform. But ultimately, for the 21st century, they're proposing a comprehensive tax reform, which is what we call a destination-based cash flow tax. Okay, that was a real mouthful right there. So getting too wonky here.
Are we bringing up, what was that thing that you proposed at one point that it didn't work out?
Border adjustment tax. Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, it's the new border adjustment tax.
Well, it's a consumption-based type of tax.
Okay.
But it does it in such a way that it proposes a single entity tax, so we don't have all these different kinds of incorporations, and that businesses are taxed at 15% on their actual consumed income, and that they can write off all their expenses in plant and equipment. That is an extremely globally competitive tax. In order to pay for converting to a system like this that puts us in a very good competitive stance worldwide, gives us high productivity and better wage gains, they propose a carbon tax, a border adjustable carbon tax on top of that. We believe that that is a smarter way to go after decarbonizing than the pork barrel, green pork spending that you just saw with the Inflation Reduction Act.
I've heard that there's been some talk in Congress about a border adjustment carbon tax.
That's what this proposal is.
And so I love the fact that this is all coming together.
A destination. This is a good, tried and true conservative business tax reform with a border adjusted carbon tax on top. So it gets a couple things. Number one, it taxes the carbon that's dirty from China and India so that they are playing in this game. Number two, it sends price signals on carbon through the marketplace so that you're incentivizing innovation and entrepreneurs to figure out how to best decarbon versus sitting in Washington, picking winners and losers and subsidizing yesterday's technology with tax credits and spending and subsidies like the Democrats have been doing.
Yeah, but the way it works is that the exporters from other countries, that Americans are importing those products, the countries have to certify their
carbon content.
Their carbon content, or their green, their climate compliance, whatever you want to call it. If they do that, then the tariff, I call it a tariff, you guys call it a tax. The tariff is lower.
Yeah.
The border adjustment tax makes me laugh because people want to. It's a tariff, isn't it, Paul?
It really isn't. It actually doesn't work like that. No, it doesn't really.
But if you don't get certified, if you don't have the clean deal, and you're a dirty, and you try to send something to us, we put a little tax on it.
That's right. So we take the tax off our exports, and we put a tax on our imports based on carbon intensity. Okay. And so what that does is it makes sure that we in America don't shoulder all of the burden of this, number one. Number two, it makes sure that we send price signals throughout the global economy about pricing carbon. The point I make in this is, and that Kyle and Alex are talking about, is we're America. America typically sets the trend for these things. And America should set the trend for the smartest free market way to decarbonize the economy so that you're not trading economic growth for decarbonizing.
Absolutely.
You're having economic growth, upward mobility, entrepreneurship, risk-taking innovation,
100%.
and decarbonizing.
I'm with you 100%, Paul.
Versus what the Democrats are trying to do, which is basically to subsidize and pick winners and losers in the marketplace.
Yes, I got it all. But just one thing to be clear about, you are... And I'm not critical of this by any means, but I think you are a leader in this. You are acknowledging that there is a climate change problem.
Yes, and that we should move our economies to decarbonizing. Okay. We should do that.
Because there is a problem.
That's right. What I tell my conservative friends, if you're not sure about this science, then let's err on the side of getting it right. Let's err on the side of being clean. And more importantly, just from a practical standpoint, I do believe we should decarbon. So to answer your question, but from a practical standpoint, the world is doing this. All the various different economies are putting in place decarbonizing policies, but the decarbonizing policies they're putting in place are not good policies. It's cronyism, it's subsidization, it's old technologies. Why don't we lead and show, let's send price signals through the marketplace on carbon so that you can really fuel innovation and help the private sector help us through this. And we're demonstrating you can have fast economic growth. So here's the conservative bargain here. We want supply-side pro-growth tax reform that is good for higher economic growth and mobility in exchange for participating on smarter decarbonizing policy.
Okay, so I got it, that you're gonna reduce the tax burden on American businesses that are doing the right thing and let them be free and do as much as they can, and I'm all for that. I think a lot of people are, but you need to raise the revenue that you lose, and the way you're going to do it is you're going to make dirty
a good way of
climate polluters, which sounds all great to me. No change to the tax rates for middle class Americans.
Yeah, so there are some proposals here that Alex and Kyle have for middle income, and that is to compress the tax rates and make them less. They're still graduated, they're still progressive, but to lower that top tax rate. And we have other proposals about combining the child tax credit and the earned income tax cuts that are pro-family and pro-work. We have a above-the-line deduction for charitable donations because we want to We want to breathe life into civil society. So there are other reforms here on the individual side of the tax code.
Great group. They're great scholars. They do great work, and you getting them together and pulling this all together in one place is just a great service. One last thing on revenue and spending. You know these charts that we all put up on percent of GDP spending or revenue.
That's right.
What's the numbers you like? 20%, 19%,
well,
22%?
There's no. I would just go at our historic average. So here's the question: do we want to? Because right now the federal government is slated to double in size relative to GDP. We're supposed to go from 20% of GDP to 40% of GDP in our lifetimes. That would make our economy slow and less free, and by the way, bankrupt us. Right. Because there's no way we're going to bring revenue from 18% of GDP up to 40% of GDP. So I think the question is, can we pay for the borrowing to get through the baby boomer bulge, meaning guaranteeing these benefits for people in and near retirement, and reform these programs prospectively so that we can get that spending line back closer to 20% of GDP and revenues there over the long haul. Okay. The markets, I would argue, will allow us to do that if we put these reforms in place soon and show that over the long haul, we've got our act together. We're getting our debt under control. We have put reforms that when they take place in the future will prevent us from having a debt crisis, but we will, at the end of the day, have a federal government that is around 20% of GDP.
And that does distinguish us from European countries. And
100%.
I mean, that's what makes America more free. I mean, and if we can do that, then it's a funny thing that's a way of measuring our freedom.
That's right.
And okay, now I want to ask you a specific question because I know you've been working on this topic, and I think there's a chapter in here that endorses it, and I want you to tell us what it is. Central bank digital currency.
Yeah. So we had to go. We went outside of AEI.
You
let me do this. I went with my good friend Kevin Warsh at the Hoover Institute.
Yes, I know. Even worse.
Yeah. Hey, look, this is all one big conservative family here.
That's right.
We're all happy and together here.
No, and Kevin's a great guy.
He's a great guy. He's a longtime friend of mine, and he was a Federal Reserve governor. So we, through the Warsh, Kevin and I have talked about this for a long time. He is proposing a two-tier central bank digital currency system. Now, here's the key thing for conservatives. It is absolutely essential that we have a two-tier system. What do I mean by that? You do not want to have the China-type system. China is in the midst of digitizing their RMB, their currency. China's central bank, the PCOB, they will control money for consumers, for their people, and they're going to try and export this to the Belt Road countries and hook everybody up to their payment rails, where China can surveil and control the conditionality and the surveillance of people's money. That is Big Brother cubed. So what we're proposing here, what Kevin's proposing is, knowing that we should digitize our currencies, because right now there's a lot of friction that is paid. Meaning when you send money overseas or around the economy, you lose some of that value, and it goes to intermediaries. With blockchain technology, with digitization, you can get rid of that friction. So think of the efficiencies that are gained by having digital payment rails and digital currencies.
So I just to stop you there, just because this is one that comes up a lot in this, and I don't want to use I don't want to say crypto, but let's just say this new kind of currency or this new kind of digital.
Crypto's not a sovereign currency. That's a little different.
This is a central
bank. This is sovereign money. Yeah.
Because when people say that friction takes a lot of money out,
it does.
I'm thinking regulators,
bank fees,
4 to 6%, taxes.
No, this is pre-taxes.
A way to avoid?
It's not a way to avoid taxes. It's a way to avoid all the fees that get tacked onto your money when you're sending it around the world or around your economy.
So it forces the banking industry, really.
It does
to be cheaper to the consumer.
That's right.
To the user.
It takes away all that friction. So, but a two-tier system is what we have today. The central bank gives its dollars to bank clearinghouses. Governed, regulated banks. They are the ones that integrate with the economy. They are the ones that interact with consumers. So there is a line of separation between the state, the government, and the consumer, which are the banks.
Okay.
We propose to maintain that two-tier system so that there never is a direct line from the Federal Reserve to the consumer, because God forbid Elizabeth Warren becomes Treasury Secretary and decides to, put people's, ESG scores on their money and tries to intimidate people. So what we want to do is get ahead of this issue, keep Big Brother out of our money and make sure that we have money that honors our privacy and our liberties, but harnesses the technology that comes with digitization, because we know this is coming. It's going to move around the world. Other central banks are doing this. So the question is, does America lead or follow or get in this and determine the terms of this? Does America lead with the terms to make sure that money is free, private, and our liberties are protected, but that we get the benefit of digital currencies and a digital sovereign? This, in my mind, is how, combined with these fiscal reforms, you maintain the dollar as the world's reserve currency. If the dollar ultimately doesn't digitize, this is my opinion, and it's definitely a debated point. If the dollar doesn't ultimately digitize, that will hasten the day when we no longer are seen as the reserve currency. And if we lose our reserve currency status, we will lose this exorbitant privilege that gives America enormous power, hard and soft power around the world, and economic benefits for us here at home.
Now, just on this last thing, and then Phoebe, you got to get in here, but I've got one big topic we still haven't covered, so just be aware that I've got something else on my mind, but we'll get there in a minute. But Kevin did a good job on this. This is a complicated issue. A lot of Americans don't understand it. You're pleased with how he...
I am, and he spelled it out. So it gets kind of complicated. I mean, for those of us who spent 2 decades working on these issues,
But where is it in Congress? I mean, is that something that's alive now?
Oh, yeah, it's a live conversation. I'm excited about that, we narrowly got the majority. But as Kevin McCarthy said the other day, our gavels don't come in small, medium, and large. We have gavels. And the smartest guy on this issue is about to get the gavel in charge of this, which is Patrick McHenry. He's going to be the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. Thank God we're coming to the age of dollar digitization, of digital currencies, when Patrick McHenry is in charge of this jurisdiction. So there's going to have to be Web3 laws in 2023, if only because of the FTX fiasco, which is sort of an Enron for crypto.
But this is something that the parties could come together on.
I do.
With
I think so.
Patrick's
I think that's
leadership.
exactly right.
So who is the Senate equivalent?
Well, right now, that banking committee, which we lost the majority or didn't get the majority there, is Sherrod Brown. I think he's probably not the right guy in this particular issue. There are plenty of Democrats. Kirsten Sinema is a big Democrat on this. Kristen Gillibrand's a Democrat that's really into this. Cory Booker. So there are Democrats in the Senate who are into this issue, know the issue, and I do believe we have no choice but to have bipartisan solution on this.
I want to ask more broadly just about the political feasibility of the book and the set of proposals that you have. I mean, in some ways, it was a disappointing midterm for Republicans, but on the other hand, you did see voters reject a lot of kind of populist policies, and it seems like there could be an opening for more substantive policy leaders. How do you kind of make the case of the urgency of these proposals, especially to Republicans, where a lot of these ideas have kind of fallen out of vogue or aren't forefront for Republican politicians right now?
Yeah, we spent the last year plus working on this book, putting these pieces together, negotiating with all the various scholars, with the eye toward getting back to a substantive debate in this session of Congress, knowing and hoping that we would probably at least have divided government. My thesis was we'll get at least one of the majorities, the House, which we did. Mm-hmm. And I think the key is to raise our gaze to a more substantive policy debate so that we can get ahead of these really big pressing problems in America. Our politics have not been that serious lately. And so what this attempts to do is bring us to more serious policy discussions so that we can have a robust debate about getting ahead of America's problems, offer a solution so that candidates can run on solutions and then have a mandate if they win that election to put these solutions in place. Now, what I just said sounds kind of partisan. It is and it isn't. It's partisan in that I think the conservative movement needs to get back to foundational ideas and principles for offering the country real solutions to the problems that they're confronting. It's also important to note that America is facing some serious inflection points that we have to get ahead of. But the bipartisan point I'm trying to make is I think, this is just from my 25 years in public life, 20 in Congress and 5 as a staffer before then, that we've sort of come to a Venn diagram of consensus on the social contract in America. We feverishly debated the Great Society and the New Deal in the 20th century. I think in the 21st century, we all agree, I'm talking about between the 20-yard lines, center right and center left and everything in between, agree we want health and retirement security for people in old age, for people who are low income. We want a vibrant social safety net to help people who cannot help themselves and to help people get back on their feet who are down on their luck, to help reinvigorate this idea of upward mobility so that the next generation is better off, that the condition of your birth doesn't determine the outcome of your life in this country. We have consensus on this, general consensus. And so if you take a look at all the ideas that are out there and all the private sector innovations that have occurred out there and what we've learned in the field of economics, I think there is a general consensus for how we can make these programs work better, make them solvent, and let's agree, we want to do this. We want health and retirement security. We want a social safety net. This is the social contract that the center right and the center left agrees on. We should debate how to do it, but we should not debate kicking the can down the road and watching it blow up in our faces in a debt crisis. So let's get on with debating about how to solve this problem so that we can actually solve it. And let's have some elections about that so we can get ourselves a mandate and then go fix the problem before it's too late.
In the timing of it, I do compliment you, Paul, that it's perfectly timed. I mean, it's coming out now just as the two houses are putting together their conferences for the next session. You've got, 2 years to work on it in this way.
Exactly.
And then the presidential election. It's comprehensive. There's a lot here. There's a lot for people to work on. It's definitely nonpartisan. This is not a partisan document.
That's right. It's not
in any way.
It's written by conservatives from a.
I know. Don't worry. Yeah. Don't worry. I mean, it's okay. You can be conservative and nonpartisan.
That's right. I agree.
And you don't always have to be partisan.
I'm actually not always partisan.
Yeah, I know you're not. I know you're not. But so I think that what you described is sort of the timing of it, and it reminds me of other periods where a lot of good ideas were developed and then proposed at the right time for them to actually be implemented over a couple-year period. But there is one dividing line on the social contract, in my opinion, that is not so easy to reconcile with Democrats, and that's work.
Work. I knew you were telling. I saw your punch.
What is the role of work requirements in whatever social contract is in this book?
Absolutely essential if you want to have upward mobility restored in America. If you want to get from the malaise that we are projected to have, the Congressional Budget Office is forecasting economic growth in America will be trending at 1.6%. We used to be at 3%. Having our growth, cutting our growth rate in half is an enormous difference in prosperity and upward mobility. So the thing you need to fix this problem is labor force participation, people working. The thing you need to make sure that we don't have a permanent underclass of people, being dependent upon other things like government for their success is work and upward mobility. So throughout the proposals here that reform our social safety net is a constant tie to work requirements, and it's a simplification of the safety net. It's combining the earned income tax credit with the child tax credit with work requirements. It's overhauling K through 12 education and job training education and our social safety net system, all toward getting people who are able-bodied to work. So it does clearly come down on the side, and there's been a big debate about this, even in the conservative movement. Right. This comes down on the side of being pro-family while also promoting work. So that is inescapable if you want to get us out of the malaise we're consigned to, and if you want to get people out of being stuck in their current station of life and being forever dependent on government programs for their livelihood, to being independent, upward mobile, and living the best version of their lives.
And so, we lived through the debate of the Biden Build Back Better Act with its very generous child tax credit that went to all families, regardless of whether either of the parents worked at all, not even 1 hour. And I think there was a time during that debate, Paul, when you were pretty discouraged. Yeah. You were pretty discouraged. And it didn't happen. It got taken out
because of one person, Joe Manchin.
Yes, I know. But this book endorses that philosophy. We can't be sending checks to non-workers who make no effort to get into the workforce and are able-bodied. We just can't be doing that.
If you pay people not to work, they won't work. And if they don't work, then everybody suffers. Not only do they suffer and their lives miss their potential.
And their families.
And their families miss their potential, but the entire economy suffers. And that is why the Congressional Budget Office, among other reasons, is saying if we have fewer workers in the workforce, we won't grow nearly as fast, and there will be that fewer opportunities, that slower wage gains, less productivity. So getting more people in the workforce is essential to our shared prosperity and inclusive growth.
So you've it's a great book. great document, something we're working on, and our scholars are proud of, and we're proud that it's produced.
Yeah, my goal here is that you've got 18 people here who would be perfect, testimony on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, that's
right. If they're building reforms, and if they're look in divided government, we're not going to get everything right.
Right.
But it's a time to go back to the basics, go back to the drawing board, and start curating and building policies that are right for the 21st century to get our country, out of the malaise that we're consigned to avoid a debt crisis, to prevent the austerity that would befall us if we don't do anything. And there's a great list of scholars here who are ready and willing and able to go to Capitol Hill and help connect with policymakers to curate and build these ideas.
Okay, but you've also made some news in the weeks leading up to the release of this book by making some comments about the presidential campaign in 2024. And you were pretty strong. I mean, I don't have the quote in front of me, but you basically said the country needs to move in a new direction, for new leadership, for a new time, turn the page. Let's not go back to the former president.
That's right.
How are you feeling about that now?
I don't think he's going to get the nomination at the end of the day. I really don't. And the reason I say that is because we're going to want to win. And we really know we don't win with him. Look, if the evidence is so painfully obvious now, we lost our House majority in 2018. We lost the presidency and the Senate in 2020. And again, right now in 2022, we just got a rude awakening. We lost the Senate, frankly, because of Trump, because of the Trump-backed primary. He got people through the primaries who couldn't win the general election in the Senate, and therefore we did not get the Senate majority as a consequence. And it's really clear evidence that we have a smaller House majority because of his people not being able to win the general elections in the House as well. So that's 4 election cycles, four instances here where we lost the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the Senate again, and barely we're going to have a small majority in the House. And I think the major contributing factor is because of Trump. I think it's really obvious. The swing voter in America is a suburban voter. They don't like Trump. They won't vote for Trump. But just take a look at like the DeSantis polls versus Trump. That swing suburban voter likes Republicans. They like conservative policies. So I'm grateful. Frankly, I was not an ever-Trumper because I governed with Donald Trump. And I'm grateful for those policy achievements we had.
Including the tax bill.
Great policy achievements. Deregulation, tax reform, criminal justice reform, great judges, awesome achievements. I don't wish the man ill will. I hope he and his family have happy, healthy lives, private lives in the future. But it is really clear if we keep going forward with him, we're going to keep getting the same result, which is we're going to lose elections. We can't afford to lose elections. There's a country that needs saving. The left, people don't like what the left are offering. They don't like the inflation and the big spending and the nanny state government that comes with this. So it is a time for new leaders. It is a time where we have a stable of next generation conservative leaders that are more than capable of leading this country and more than capable of winning an election, which Donald Trump I don't think can. That's why I feel the way I feel.
So turning to the more positive, we had 4 potential chairmen, look like they're going to be chairman in the AEI building yesterday. Mrs. McMorris Rogers. Who were the other?
Who else? I wasn't here. So.
We had Crenshaw.
Yep.
He was great. Are you pleased with the members, your former colleagues, who are getting these chairmanship appointments?
I am. They're going to finish. I think they do chairmanships the week after Thanksgiving. So there's a couple that races. I won't get into who gets
Ways
what.
And Means.
Yeah, I won't get. Yeah,
come on.
That's my committee.
Yeah, come
Ways
on.
and Means is my sweetheart committee. I love that committee. Yeah. But Kathy's clearly going to be the Commerce Committee chair. She's a great leader. She's going to be a really good person for us in that space. Patrick McHenry is going to be financial services. But there's a competitive race for budget chair, a competitive race for Ways and Means chair. These are my old stomping grounds. All of them are friends of mine. Yeah. I used to run the steering committee, which will make this choice. Point is, we're going to be in good hands. We've got good policy leaders stepping into the breach who are going to be working on these issues, conducting the oversight, frankly, you need to conduct, but also teasing out ideas by taking our long, timeless held conservative principles, applying them to the problems of the day, offering the country solutions. This book is an attempt to help start that process so that we can go to the American people all together collectively of conservatives, center-right, and offer solutions. And that if we win that election, then we will have earned ourselves a mandate to, in 2025, solve these problems, get this country on the right track. That, to me, is a very exciting proposition.
So you are affiliated with AEI as a scholar fellow. And last question, and I'm not looking for an advertisement, so just tell it to us straight, but how do you explain to our listeners how you fit that responsibility, which you have, into the way in which you see yourself and see your career?
Yeah, I decided to go back to sort of private and public vocational life, not elected politics. I teach economics at Notre Dame. I have a charitable foundation that focuses on poverty economics, center-right poverty economics. That is really exciting work. And then here at AEI, where we work at curating good ideas to solve the country's problems. And my own hope, having been 20 years in Congress, in my early days in Congress, there wasn't a week where people like me were not over at a think tank working on ideas, or they were in my office helping with ideas. There's been a breakdown in that. And the conservative movement on Capitol Hill, you've had a lot of sort of, I would say, performance art and entertainment politics lacking some substance. And so what I hope is we can reconnect conservative policy thinkers with conservative lawmakers to start getting past the performance art and the entertainment politics and get back to real substance and real solutions that actually speak to where people are and solve the problems that we have today. And so I enjoy this sort of private life, vocational life, where I work on these ideas because I was grateful for the career I had. I loved public life. I loved campaigning. But right now, I just like working on ideas. I like the policy side of it. That's kind of my natural love. It's where I came from. It's where I am now.
That connection between people with ideas and research and analysis and people in positions of power is what we do at AI, and you are helping us greatly to do that well. So thank you very much. Phoebe, anything more?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the discussion today. Please remember to subscribe and rate the podcast. Feel free to send us any feedback or suggestions at banter@aei.org.